Major League Baseball has been a part of American culture for over 150 years, which is much longer than any other of the major American sports can say. Now that's been more than enough time for baseball to be seeded in cultures around the world. We've been making baseball videos for almost 3 years now, and we really haven't talked much about baseball outside of the United States. We did briefly talk about baseball in Germany in my Max Kepler video recently, but I don't think we went into enough depth for that one. This video is going to be the start of a special series where we take a look at the game of baseball in different countries around the world. Between last year and this year, the league will have played games in Japan, London, and Puerto Rico, with more countries sure to come in the future. Now because of this, we figured that now would be a pretty good time to dive into something like this. Throughout this series, I'll be joined by my good friend Zach, who some of you met in the most recent episode of my podcast, and who you'll hopefully be seeing much more of in the future. Consider this video the start of a transcontinental road trip of sorts. And on this road trip, it's going to be you guys that decide where we go next. So if you'd like to hear more about how you can choose which country we head to next, stick around to the end of the video. Now our first stop is the island of Japan, located in East Asia and over 6,600 miles from Fenway Park. Japan is one of the largest markets for baseball anywhere in the world, but we'll talk more about the sport on the ground in Japan in just a little bit. For now, let's talk about some of the country's greatest exports, those who made a name for themselves in Major League Baseball here in the States. Meet Masanori Murakami, who made his Major League debut on September the 1st, 1964, becoming the league's first Japanese baseball player. Murakami was a teen baseball prodigy back home in Japan and signed with the Nankai Hawks of the Nippon Professional Baseball League while he was still in high school. We'll talk more about the league itself later. Murakami was asked to come back to play in Japan after 2 solid seasons with the San Francisco Giants, and left Major League Baseball without a Japanese pitcher in their ranks for over 30 years. And that was until Hideo Nomo knocked on their door. Hideo Nomo really opened up a new avenue for NPB-MLB relations. Nomo's journey to the big leagues started with a loophole in NPB's rules, allowing him to sign with the Los Angeles Dodgers in February of 1995. Nomo's rookie season set a pretty high bar for future Japanese players. The National League leader in strikeouts and an owner of a 2.54 rookie ERA took home the NL Rookie of the Year award, and of course being the first Japanese player ever to do so. The following season, he threw the first of 2 career no-hitters, and is to this day the only one to ever throw one at Coors Field. Now Nomo really never got back to his 1995 form, but did end up pitching through his age 39 season. Nomo's work in the major leagues opened the gates for many in the coming years, from Hideki Matsui to Daisuke Matsuzaka to Yu Darvish and Shohei Ohtani. Nomo's rookie season laid the groundwork for all of these Japanese stars, but arguably none more celebrated than Ichiro Suzuki. Ichiro's accolades are just astonishing. 28 seasons of professional baseball, 10 consecutive 200-hit seasons, 17 consecutive professional seasons as an All-Star and Gold Glove winner, the list goes on. Coming over to the Mariners during the steroid era when hitters like Bonds and McGwire stole the show, Ichiro really stood out and was a breath of fresh air for the game of baseball. Now these accomplishments were incredible, no doubt, but what I find most telling was his effect on baseball back home. Ichiro means more to Japanese fans than you could possibly imagine. His success in the major leagues inspired millions of people back in Japan in more ways than one. Current Japanese players playing in the major leagues told ESPN in an interview done last spring that he is one of, if not the most famous man in Japan, and he's basically viewed as a god back home. As previously mentioned, Ichiro's first taste of professional baseball came back at home playing for the NPB. So as promised before, let's talk more about the league itself. This is Japan's equivalent to Major League Baseball, and raised many of the Japanese players we've seen in the majors in the past and present. The NPB consists of 2 leagues, Central and Pacific, and 12 professional teams. Their seasons start and end at roughly the same times as Major League Baseball's does, but play 146-game seasons. Now the rules between the 2 leagues are almost identical, with one major exception: NPB games can end in a tie. If the game is tied after 9 innings, the team will play 3 additional innings, and if the game is still tied, the game ends in a tie. This can even happen in the playoffs and the Japan Series, which is their equivalent of the World Series. Now the only exception to this rule would be if the Japan Series had to go to more than 7 games because of a tie during the series, then those extra games could go as long as they needed to. This actually only happened once in 1986. The Cebu Lions beat the Hiroshima Toyo Carp in Game 8 of the Japan Series on October 27th of 1986, which is actually one heck of a coincidence if you haven't realized it already. Now get this, so this one time that the Japan Series ever had to go to a Game 8 was on the same date that the Mets won Game 7 of the World Series in the United States. That's pretty cool. Other differences between the NPB and MLB NPB teams have a 6-man rotation, a 28-man roster where 3 players are scratched before each game, and more. Now, the NPB was formerly known as the JBL, or the Japanese Baseball League, and there's a pretty interesting story there too. The early days of the JBL featured them partnering up with Major League Baseball. The Americans composed a team of American League All-Stars featuring the likes of Babe Ruth, Jimmy Fox, Lou Gehrig, and others who traveled to Japan and played exhibition games across the country. Now, they went undefeated, but that's okay. It was a really great thing for the country, as it was a great experience for the fans and a great event for the members of both parties. The Japanese All-Star team that played against the Americans traveled to the United States the following year and played in games against college and minor league teams, and actually stayed together after the tour ended to form the Yomiuri Tokyo Giants, who are actually still around today. This tour was a revolutionary step in the evolution of Japanese baseball. There's another interesting fact about that tour. Babe Ruth really left his mark on Japan during his time there. Japanese fans would go absolutely bonkers watching him play, and their love for him actually almost played a role during the Second World War. A decade after the tour during World War II, the United States Department of Defense was considering sending Babe Ruth to Guam in order to send radio messages to the Japanese people, convincing them to end the war. Now, this didn't actually happen, it was just being considered, but it still puts into context the love for Babe Ruth the people of Japan had. So the JBL and professional baseball as a whole in Japan gained tons of steam after the 1934 Japan tour, and over the years, the JBL eventually blossomed into the NPB. Now, to talk more about the culture surrounding baseball in Japan, as well as its influence on baseball today, let's hand it over to Zach.
What's the first thing that comes to mind when you think of Japan? Mount Fuji? Cherry blossoms? Sushi? Ramen? Anime? And can't talk about that. Let's talk about baseball in Japan. A baseball game in Japan is quite the spectacle compared to an MLB game. Just have a listen.
なんと1球目でライトへ行った手応え十分そうなんだどうだ打った打ったさよなら
NPB games more closely resemble college football or soccer than MLB games actually. Each game brings an excess of passion and energy that you simply can't find as often in Major League Baseball. Each player gets their own song that the fans will chant when they get called up in the lineup. Different war songs for their teams are sung throughout the game to keep everyone engaged, and there's a mutual respect between both teams and fans no matter who's playing and where. If the Yomiuri Giants are playing the Hokkaido Nippon Ham Fighters, you'll probably see an equal showing from both fans. How often, if ever, do you see an MLB game with almost the same amount of fans on both sides of the stadium? It's common practice in Japanese baseball. Japanese culture is built on a foundation of respect, honor, and discipline. No one is exempt from this, no matter your age. Whether you're an adorable little tyke walking 3 miles in the blazing countryside humidity to primary school, or an Oji-san hanging around the local ramen shop reading the newspaper and having an evening beer with the boys, everyone is built upon the same foundation. In baseball culture, discipline and respect are 2 of the foundations of the game, so it seems like a perfect blend of cultures, right? Well, yes and no. Yes, in that the devotion to the game is intense, and everyone is striving to be the best while having the utmost respect for the game and the competition. The foundation of Japanese culture has come to a culmination, where in order to fulfill one's cultural values, you must either give 110% to everything you do, or basically just don't try at all. The downside to this is that because of these cultural values, people tend to overwork themselves to an extreme. 80-hour work weeks are common, and overextension on the job is becoming a severe problem. As that applies to the workplace, that also applies to sports. Yoshitomo Tsutsugo is one of Japan's most versatile players, and played for the Yokohama Bay Stars. He was signed by the Tampa Bay Rays this offseason. He's an extremely dynamic and exciting player who made his rookie debut at 18 years old in the NPB. Tsutsugo had an interesting press conference in December of last year, where he made his decision to go to play in the MLB. Tsutsugo stated that Japan is having a crisis with youth baseball culture. Tsutsugo said, "I've seen small children who want to play baseball quitting because of the excessive training or because they play when they are injured. The way I see it, the problem is that even at a young age, the focus is on winning rather than on education for kids' futures. While the culture plays a large role in keeping the game intense and its spirit alive and well, it's slowly becoming overbearing. At the same time, these extremities have allowed Japan to produce some of the greatest baseball players in the world. Similar to how baseball starts in the US, children become interested in the game at a young age. While they're young and more interested in having fun, there's a lot of pride from the children in playing the game. Japanese youth baseball is often seen in the Little League World Series as they've been one of the most dominant countries in the series' history. In preparation for the series, teams will practice 8 to 10 hours every Saturday and Sunday. The coaches say the lengths of their practices help teach discipline and repetition, with the hopes of refining the players' techniques until it's flawless and instinctive. After practice is over, the kids will spend time getting the field back into good shape. So even after practice is over, they're still working hard. This teaches them the foundations of discipline and respect for the game of baseball, which they can bring forward into adulthood. High school baseball. Some say the pinnacle of Japanese baseball. High school ball in Japan could almost be an entire professional league in itself. The best way I could describe high school baseball in Japan is like high school football in Texas. Everything is big. Heroes of the game are enshrined in this tournament, as some of the most famous Japanese players in the game begin their professional paths here. Teams play in large stadiums with giant crowds, with sometimes around 47,000 people watching. It's absurd, but I love it. The spirit of the game is at an all-time high. The fans' and players' passions burn like the morning sun, and everything is grandiose. There are no corners cut for high school baseball in Japan. High school players around the country play in 2 major tournaments, those being the Spring Koshien, which is kind of like the play-in or the regular season, and the Summer Koshien, which is the playoffs. The culmination of these tournaments is the National High School Baseball Championship hosted at Hanshin Koshien Stadium. In a sense, it's like the College World Series with the viewing numbers of the MLB World Series. The popularity of the tournament is nothing short of a phenomenon to say the least, and the excitement brings to the people in the game is just unmatched. After high school ball, players come to a split in the road for the next steps in their playing career. At this point, the path is pretty similar to the US. Players can decide to go to college and play ball in Tokyo at one of the 6 major universities, known as the Tokyo Big Six, or try to take their talents to the NPB. Unlike Major League Baseball, the NPB minor leagues aren't nearly as expansive. The NPB minors will only have a single farm team, and if some teams have expanded beyond 70 players, they might have a third team. The farm teams will play each other in the Shin Nippon League, and the third teams will play the farm teams if there aren't enough third teams to play each other. So, to summarize, the first teams are the pros who play the pros, and the pro teams have farm teams who will play the other farm teams, and if the rosters are big enough, the pro teams will have third teams who will play other third teams, but sometimes if there aren't enough third teams for the third teams to play each other, then the third teams will play the farm teams, so the players on the third teams can eventually move to the farm teams, so they can eventually move to the pro leagues. Japanese baseball has affected the game drastically since its creation. Cultures have merged together in a wonderful melting pot, and the game has changed worldwide because of its influence. You ever hear of a screwball or the gyro ball? I'm sure if you've played MLB The Show and created a pitcher at any point, you've seen them before. The screwball and gyro ball were introduced by Japanese baseball players. The gyro ball is like the halfway point between a fastball and a curveball, kind of like a knuckleball. The pitch has a side-over side spin like a bullet, and is thrown at the same arm speed as the fastball with a small downward break. The screwball is basically a slider that bends in the opposite direction. It's more commonly seen than the gyro ball, and it's also commonly referred as the shuto. The shuto is used by most Japanese pitchers in the major leagues today, but came to fame from Masaji Hiramatsu. His screwball was called the razor shuto because it was believed that the ball would literally cut the air when it was thrown. Luckily enough, I was able to find some archival footage of the razor ball in action, and it's fascinating to see live. Check this out. This is only the tip of the iceberg for what's to come from Japanese baseball. The NPB grows in popularity more and more each year, and with the Olympics coming to Tokyo this summer and the NPB season in full swing, there's bound to be more attention drawn to the league. I look forward to seeing what more Japan will bring to the MLB in the near future, and the excitement players like Darvish, Ohtani, and Tsutsugo will bring to the league this season.
We hope you all had as good a time in Japan as we did. I'd like to first thank Zach for joining me today. Keep in mind, this is his first ever YouTube commentary, so he's just getting the rust off. If you guys remember my first video on the channel almost 3 years ago now, it was nowhere close to where our videos are now, so Zach's gonna keep getting better as we go along here. So I mentioned before that you guys can choose where we head off next on this road trip. All you have to do is comment down below which country you'd like us to travel to next, either the DR or Cuba. I'll give you all a week to decide, and by the 25th of February, we'll have our next location. Alright everybody, thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.
助の領収書だぜ。